Let's take an inside look to see how Salesforce calculates test coverage. Understanding this process is going to help you game the system. It'll teach you how to write better test classes. I'm going to show you our Hello World trigger and its test class side by side. On the left, we have our trigger. Lines that are not yet covered by our test class will be highlighted in red. Lines that are covered by our test class will be highlighted in green. On the right, we have our test class. We'll be going through this test class line by line to see what line of code gives us our coverage and how much. Let's begin. Starting at line 1 of our test class, we see that nothing is covered yet in our trigger. Everything is red. Moving along our test class, we enter our test method, create a lead, set fields, and insert the lead. Still, no lines of code are covered in our trigger. Then, we set the company field in our test class, and still no coverage. Finally, when we update our lead, every line of code in our trigger executes and we get 100% code coverage. The update call to the myLead variable saves it to our database. That line of code is equivalent to a user going into Salesforce, changing fields, then finally hitting the save button on the page. As a result of that save, all lead triggers that are run on update are executed. This, of course, includes our Hello World trigger. Notice that the insert here did not get us any coverage in Hello World. That's because Hello World only runs when records are updated, not inserted. Now let's do the same thing, but for our Apple Watch trigger and test class. Starting off, everything is red. As we progress through our test class, we enter our create opportunity method. We create an opportunity in our code. Then we set the name, stage name, and close date fields. Still, everything in our trigger is red and no lines of code have been covered. When we insert our opportunity in our test class, this saves OPP to our database and kicks off all opportunity triggers that run on insert, including Apple Watch. 100% code coverage yet again. Note that this isn't perfectly accurate since Salesforce ignores some trivial lines of code in its calculations, but you get the picture. Okay, now test classes might be looking too easy to you. All we have to do is save records and we get 100% coverage off the bat? Not quite. Let me show you a slightly more involved example where you'd only get partial coverage. Let's say the CEO is unhappy with our Dreamforce Apple Watch promotion. There are some jokers out there who are purposely gaming the system just to get a free Apple Watch. To counter this, the CEO is now mandating that the opportunity must be worth at least $50,000 for the person to get an Apple Watch. But to sweeten the deal, we'll be giving away the gold versions of Apple Watches instead. Fancy! So, being the great Salesforce developers that we are, we rewrite our trigger and call it Apple Watch Gold instead. And now, we're adding an if statement that'll only create a task if the opportunity amount is at least 50 grand. I haven't formally taught you if statements yet, but I think you get the picture. We have an if statement, and if the code inside the parentheses evaluates to true, everything inside the if statement scope runs. If not, the code is ignored. Let's see what happens now when we run our test class. Once Salesforce gets to our most important line of code, our insert, and runs it, we see that we get some code coverage in our trigger, but not all. In fact, we don't even meet the minimum 75% code coverage we need to deploy this. That's because our opportunity amount is not greater than 50,000. It's blank. so the code in our if statement never runs. Everything else does, which gets us some coverage, but not enough. To fix this, we'll revise our Apple Watch test class. This time, when we create the opportunity, we'll be sure to set its amount field to a number greater than 50,000. Now when we run our test class, our opportunity meets the requirements of our if statement, and all the code inside its scope is run. Back to 100% code coverage. This trigger can now be deployed.